Hello Titan Dev Team! Today we are going to be talking about collision and how to set it up properly on your assets. The main problem assets I've been seeing so far have been stairs, so let's start by talking about those. Now, most of the time what we see with stair collision generation is that we get something like this, where we have each individual step is basically mapped to a to complex collision, or we see something like this where we have some just really jagged collision bodies. And what that tends to mean is that when we navigate up and down stairs, we get this jumping from the camera. It's really unpleasant for the player. It's not something that you would want to see in a finished game. It's a little bit better on something like this where we've got some more complex collision being generated, but still we want to try and remove that as much as possible and keep our collision as simple as possible. Now, what I've done is I've created a few examples that we'll go through. So we'll start with this one. And ideally what we want to do here is get rid of this complex collision, or this UCX, kind of convex collision geometry that's been generated, and replace it with something much more simplistic. So to do that, we're going to go into our modeling mode, go down to our attributes, and then turn on simple collision editor. And this is going to allow us to very quickly and easily make box, capsule and collision actors inside the editor. So I'm just going to go in, delete all, which is going to remove the complex collision or the convex collision that's been generated on here. And I'm going to go in and add a box. Now, ideally, we want to try and use box, spheres and capsules as much as possible when we're doing this. So I'm just going to go in and make a quick collision check here. With stairs, we ideally want to have a little triangle lip coming up at the end where it's going to meet the top of the stair. So this would be this box here. And then we also want to have enough excess at the bottom that we get a nice ramp up as well. So we kind of want something like this where we have a nice kind of ramp to the middle, and then we have the steps going there, and we don't want any overlap alongside that. Now with this one, we can go in and we can kind of make the collision a little bit tighter. So that's going to work quite nicely. I'm not going to spend too long on this, but you get the general idea. So we're going to go in, add that, press accept, and now we have this nice, kind of piece of collision mesh. Now, the reason that we put this triangle lip in at the top of the bottom is, one, to give us a nice smooth ramp coming in, but also so that if we want to tile these collision, kind of steps going up, then they're going to have a nice seamless tile running through. So now we have a much more simplistic collision body that's going to work for these steps. And you can see that even though we have put that simplistic collision on, we still have our IK on our legs doing the correct interpolation on our legs. So you can see that our footsteps are still matching those steps correctly. And that's because that's using a different collision trace for those steps. So it still looks visually correct, even though we have a much more simplistic collision body on our asset. So I've seen a few of these instances. Ideally, we want to try and use this simplistic collision wherever possible. So for stuff like this, where we have like a long pole, the best thing to do is to go in, we're just going to go and remove the collision that we've got on here and add something like a capsule collision. Again, much, much cheaper, much easier to use. And again, because we've got that custom trace on our collision, we're not going to be able to distinguish between that on these assets. Stuff like this, it's been set up. Again, this is probably one of the better assets that I've seen, where they've actually gone in and set up some complex some reasonably complex collision on here without using complex collision, but they've kind of made a bit of a mistake with all of these box colliders on here. So you can just go in, delete them. Again, we don't need to use the modeling mode for this. We can go in and add our own kind of colliders just by going in and going into the collision window and adding box, sphere or cylinder, and then position them inside the viewport here. But this is a kind of good way to do it as well. And then I can see that they've got a bit of a gap there, so I'm just going to put just a little bit of excess in, so that if we join these up, they're going to connect nicely for that collision body. The next thing, so if we get to slightly more complex collision, so something like this is a really good example where we have these curved stairs in place. What we need to do at that point is probably go into like a third-party modeling tool and build in our own custom collision that we're going to import in with the asset. So you can see I've got custom imported collision here for this asset. Now this is where it gets a little bit complicated because we can only build in convex shapes. So basically you can't do anything that has kind of like interior facing shapes or anything with kind of like a hole in it. So for this particular asset, I actually went in and just broke up the shape. Now this is really easy to do. Again, if you just go in and make sure you prefix your collision mesh with UCX underscore. You can also use UBX for box, UCP for capsule, or USP for sphere if you want to use those base collision shapes as well. And wherever you can use them, you should, because they're much cheaper than these than these convex shapes that we're creating here. So because this has a curve to it, if I just brought this in as a single standard asset, it would have collated all this together and given me some errors. So we want to make sure that we've got nice kind of convex shapes going in here, which we now have on this asset. If you need to use more than one, make sure you use UCX underscore and then the name of the asset as it's seen inside here, and then underscore, and then 0123 in kind of etc. And then all we need to do is file, select all of those, go to file, export, and then export that out as an FBX, and make sure it's kind of marked all as one. And then when we import it in, you'll see that we have our nice collision imported in this here. Again, much cheaper than complex collision on that side of things, but it still gives us nice smooth steps going up on that shape. And as you can see again, my IK is still working. If I can just get the foot to go up, so you can see that the feet are still colliding to the correct position, even though we've got nice smooth collision there. Lastly, I want to talk about combining meshes. So this is an example here. I've gone in, I've made a, can get rid of that. I've created a pack level blueprint. So this is based off a level instance. And what I have done, if we go into this particular level, you can see that we've got all of these combined meshes here, so all of these individual mesh assets, and then on top of that we have a collision mesh on top of that, which is kind of a combined version of all of those. So if we go in and go into my collection, I can show you this. So we won't save any of this. Go in, unlit. So these are all my assets, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to just select all of them, go into collision, and then make sure that the collision is disabled for all of those visible assets. And then once I've done that, I can go in and I can make my joined mesh. So this is my joined mesh here. You can see that it's not visible, and that's because we have marked it as not visible and also hidden in game. And that's because we want to basically, we don't ever want to see this. We just want to use this as the collision for all of these assets. So to do this, it's really easy. Again, you just select all of the assets that you want to create the, the proxy mesh for, go into our modeling mode, and then go to our voxel wrap option. That's going to take all of these pieces and it's going to create a single unified asset. We can make sure it removes any internal faces by using the remove internal surface. And again, this is just going to give us a nice simplistic collision body. So this is really good if we've got any pack levels that have, kind of lots and lots of, kind of meshes stuck one on top of the other. And basically it's just going to allow us to create a single collision body, which is going to be much cheaper and much easier for us to compare against. And then we can just place that into the world. So now we've got that asset. You can kind of see that we've got it here. All we need to do is make sure it's marked as not visible. So we don't want this to be visible in any way, shape or form. We want it to be hidden in game, just so we never have to, we never see it, it never comes up. And then we're also going to tag it as well. And that way, if we ever use this as a PCG, we can use this. So we'll say like this is called hidden collision, something like that, and that way we can use that as a filter to say, hey, this is my hidden collision mesh, so kind of bring it in but make sure it's not visible and not not displayed, and then all of the other assets we can just make sure that they don't have collision on, and that's going to give us our final asset. So that will work for both PCG. If you filter, you use that tag filter. Again, look at the previous videos if you're not sure on how to do that. And it's going to work as the pack level as well. So we can go in and we can place this into our scene now, and we now have our instance group. So these are all of our meshes that we're using, but you can see if we go to our collision, they're marked as no collision, and then if you go to the actual one that we want to use for collision, it's marked as collision, but it's also marked as hidden in game as well for that. So this basically allows us to combine all of this stuff. We use this loads and loads in Valley of the Ancients to reduce down collision complexity, and it worked really, really well. So if you have any assets like this where you've created a pack level blueprint, or you created a PCG that has lots and lots of intersecting geometry and meshes like this, and you're having to use, you know, kind of complex collision for all of those elements, then it's well worth going in and creating a proxy collider to use instead. Hope that helps, and feel free to post any questions in the Discord.